Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of our podcast, Is Breakfast Included? Today on the show, I sit down with my good friend Richard Hilton. Richard is a member of the band Nile Rodgers Chic and shares an over 30-year relationship with Nile Rodgers. He's also worked with some of the most amazing artists on this planet, David Bowie, Diana Ross, Duran Duran, Stevie Ray and Jimmie Vaughan, which we got into quite a bit. I fanboyed a little bit. Anyway, Richard's an amazing human, a great musician, and a great touring partner. We did a lot of time on the road together back when they were supporting Duran Duran. I really appreciate him taking the time to sit down with us, and I hope you dig it. Let's check it out. All right, man. Well, if you're ready.
You want me to introduce myself?
Yeah. Tell me who you are. Tell everyone who you are.
I'm Richard Hilton. I'm a musician my whole life and currently a member of the band Chic with Nile Rodgers, in which I play keyboards. I've had a long career professionally in music. I've been working professionally in music for 50 years,
50 years.
Which makes me pretty old. And I've had a lot of recording experience. I've had a lot of experience outside of the music business as well. I had a million jobs before this one, many of which were not specifically music business. So I'm a guy who's managed to corral his best interest into a career somehow.
Yeah. Well, you and I met through Nile Rodgers and Chic. That's how we met. When did that relationship start?
My relationship with Nile started in March of 1988. I remember it well. Flashing back now. I was teaching at a small college on Long Island. I was teaching recording engineering and electronic music to a bunch of students there. And I was advisor to 120 students. I was running their most actively interesting department, and people were coming in. And happens to be where I met my lovely wife, Honey, who was the financial aid director of the school at the time.
Oh, wow.
So we worked in the same place, but not in the same job in the same place. And I was enjoying the teaching. I wasn't making very much money, but I was enjoying the teaching, and I developed some really great relationships with some of my better students who still keep in touch with me to this day, and one of whom sang the wedding song at my wedding and stuff like that. And one day my phone rang. Now, what led to the phone ringing was that for a period of about a year and a half preceding that moment, I had been trying to get a job with a company called New England Digital, who made a very expensive computer music instrument called the synclavier, or synclavier, if you like their pronunciation. And I'm very New York about it. And across those 18 months, I did 11 interviews for 4 different jobs in 3 different states, all of them at my expense, and they never did hire me. But at some point, Nile Rodgers called them needing a keyboard player who could operate a synclavier, and they gave him my name, which was way better than hiring me.
Yeah.
And so one day in March of 88, my phone rang. It was during spring break at the college, and I picked up the phone, and an Englishman named Kevin Jones says that he's calling on behalf of Nile Rodgers, and he's interested to talk to Richard Hilton. And the voice in my head said, which one of my friends is smart enough to do this to me? But pretty quickly I realized that actually this was the real thing. And I felt like I was standing at the proverbial crossroads of my life. I recognized all of this in that instant. Yeah. That from this conversation forward, my life is going to take one of 2 paths. And I wanted to take this one.
Depending on how you answered, right?
Well, we had a conversation, and he wanted to meet me, and he wanted me to bring some examples of my work. And I had done a bunch of work in the 1980s, most of which I'm still very proud of. And the process by which it got made would fill an entire podcast on its own. But the point is, I brought that with me, and I met Kevin, and I played him my music, and he appeared to be very impressed and said that I needed to meet Nile. And I came back the following week and met Nile. And he basically said, okay, you're starting Monday on a sort of a probationary basis. Mm-hmm. Let's see how it goes. So I had to give notice at the college. My friend, the dean of the music school, told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life.
Were you tenured?
No. I hadn't even been working there a full year.
Oh, okay.
I had started the previous summer, teaching through the summer, in the summer of 87, and this was March of 88.
Uh-huh.
So left the college, started working with Nile Rodgers, and almost immediately I'm doing a record and 2 movies. Because he just is constantly doing like more stuff than anybody I know. And one of those movies was Coming to America, which has now become something of a you don't know at the time, but it's become something of a classic.
Yeah.
I mean, people really, really love that movie.
Yeah.
And I learned so much doing it. We basically I had to pick up his synclavier, pack it into boxes, and ship it across the country. By the way, I had grossly exaggerated my experience with the synclavier. Grossly.
Was it the whole fake it till you make it?
Well, I knew I had all the information I needed to become good at it, and I was good on other systems already, but I had very little experience with that, and I took some crash, courses. Like 2 of my students worked in the only studio on Long Island that had a synclavier. And they got me a night in the studio for free on that synclavier. Just, here, go for it. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the night, I had programmed up a pretty rudimentary version of James Brown's Cold Sweat. And then one of my friends at New England Digital, because after all of those interviews, I'd become friends with people in the office. One of them gave me a day's lesson. And then Kevin Jones was tasked with training his replacement on the job, which was me, for a couple of weeks. And the next thing you know, I'm packing it all in boxes and shipping it across the country and going out to Paramount Studios and spending 5 weeks without a single day off working on Coming to America, which was on a ridiculous deadline. And I learned so much, and I met so many people, and I saw so many cool things, and it was just an absolute mind-blowing experience for me.
Yeah, what was that experience like? So you had recorded some music prior to the college gig, and then you went to teach.
I actually had run a major recording studio before the college gig.
Yeah.
And yes, recorded plenty of things there, and it had become an actual record. I became chief engineer of this studio. Yeah. Like I went from apprentice to chief engineer in like a year or less. It was insane. But
so what was that experience like, coming from that, being an engineer, to being thrown to the wolves, so to speak?
Well, I wasn't hired to engineer. I was hired to play keyboards and program the synclavier. Yeah. So what it was like was me scrambling to match my musical skill set with the way this thing gets operated. Mm-hmm. And it had to come together very quickly. And I had to be able. We were mocking up orchestra for Coming to America. We were doing all the orchestra stuff inside the box, which very few people were doing in 1988, and at that level. Mm-hmm. And all the guys we were working with were like, "Wow, you're going to do it like that." And then ultimately, an orchestra comes in and plays to what you've done. And before that, an actual orchestrator comes in and goes over what you've done and makes it better, which is a beautiful thing. And that guy's name was Mark McKenzie, and he was a real sweetheart. And 3 weeks in, the orchestra came and recorded all of that. And I had the most embarrassing moment of my professional life when, after having worked till 4 a.m. the night before the orchestra day, and I never do this, I overslept the session, and my phone rings in the hotel room, and I pick it up, and it's the producer of the movie on the other end of the phone saying, "Rich, where are you?" "I'll be right there." And I ran. And they had stuff to do. I mean, it turned out not to affect things that badly because they had plenty to rehearse without me running a click track in a synclavier. But I'll just never forget the sound of Leslie Bellsberg's voice on the phone that morning.
Yeah. We've all had that phone call at some point.
This big.
Yeah. How did you and Nile get on?
Great. We still do. He and I speak a particular language of music theory that is not necessarily typical or not that common amongst the people I've come in contact with in the music business since then. It's maybe more common in musical academia and things like that, but we're both very deeply trained musical theoreticians, and we talk it. So, and invariably when we're working with pretty much anybody, including our friends in the band you work with, they're kind of looking at each other like, what are these guys talking about? Like, but they come to appreciate and end up learning stuff through the experience. One guy in particular, Avicii, may he rest in peace, was like a sponge for this stuff. We'd be talking about something, and 10 minutes later, he'd write something, and it would be in it. Like, he'd absorb it, process it, and be creative with it in like a matter of minutes. It was like really interesting. And we weren't even trying to teach him anything. We were just talking about something. You know, the harmony and how it plays out in the song. So anyway, I've kind of diverged from the Coming to America story, but
no, it's fine. You said you were worked immediately upon getting hired by Nile. You were working on 2 albums and a movie.
Two movies and an album.
One album. Okay.
The other movie was called Earth Girls Are Easy. It was Julian
Jeff
Temple's
Goldblum,
movie.
right?
Yeah, Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis.
Okay.
And Nile was more along. I worked in, I would guess, the last 25% of that score, whereas Coming to America, I came in the first 20% of that score.
It's funny because, you know, Coming to America became a classic movie, and Earth Girls Easy became a cult classic movie.
Yeah, they did.
You know,
as it happens. And you know, I had never done music for movies, but he certainly seemed to have a pretty clear idea of where he was going with most of this. And you know, I had a chance to contribute musically in some ways, but mostly I was just trying to execute his
ideas.
His vision of what this score was going to be, which he could defend eloquently and vigorously to the directors each.
So 88, that was 88.
Yeah.
That was after Bowie, after the Let's Dance.
It was after he had done Bowie
what was the next big project he worked on that you got to partake in?
We were doing a couple of artists that were signed to his production company when I first got there that are not well known to people today. So the answer to that question, the first one that's well known was the B-52's Cosmic Thing, which was 1989-ish, late 88, maybe late 88 into 89. And that was another magical experience. But he still was bringing in keyboard players because I was new there, and he wasn't sure. You know, he wanted to use people he felt comfortable with and knew that he could count on. So he brings in no less than Philippe Sace, who's absolutely brilliant, a genius. You know, way better keyboard player than I am, so that was fine. And my role tended to be more technical and operational in terms of using the synclavier for what I like to call good, not evil.
Did that become a main piece of gear?
Oh, it was the gear around which all of our productions centered from the day I got there until about 1996.
Around this time, you guys worked on an album of some heroes of mine. I wanted to ask you about the Vaughan brothers.
See right behind you?
Yeah. I saw that when I walked in. Trying to figure out how to take it home with me.
I've got 1990 was a very good year for Nile Rodgers and for me. And among the things we did were the Vaughan Brothers album, and he at the same time had a television show on VH1 called New Visions. So the video era was now progressing back into trying to get live music into the studio again and move away from just a constant stream of video after video after video. And so they made this show called New Visions, and this preceded the Unplugged movement in MTV. And when VH1, and MTV all changed their whole kind of strategy. But VH1 did this thing where New Visions was on, I think, 4 nights a week. And each night was a themed night. One night is funk night. One night is soul, folk night. One night is world music night. One night is whatever, soul night. And so every week we would perform live in a television studio with one artist who was fitting one of those genres. And I was designated the musical director of the band. It was a quartet, and Nile was the host of the show, so he couldn't be the musical director of the band. He had way too much else to do. And we got to play with a whole bunch of different folks. So while that was going on, one day Jimmie, Vaughan, and Stevie Ray Vaughan show up at the studio, and we're all going to go to Texas and make a record. Or actually, we're going to go to Memphis first, then make a record. And okay. So in around May of 1990, we went to Memphis, stayed in the Peabody Hotel, famous for the ducks. You ever been in the Peabody Hotel?
I've never been.
There's a duck master who leads these ducks on a parade through the hotel lobby every morning and into a fountain where they go swimming around.
Okay.
And it's this whole ritual. He's got a uniform, and he's got a way of talking that I can't really do. But he's get on, ducks, and the ducks are going. So we're staying at the Peabody Hotel, working at Ardent Studios, and recording basic tracks for the Vaughan brothers with basically the band that was on the VH1 show, which was Larry Aberman on drums and Al Berry on bass, me and Nile. And I was thrilled. I was just so excited to be with those guys and making this record. And I'm so proud of what came out of it. And I really enjoyed the record. I ended up engineering like 2/3 of the record because I asked them if they would let me, because I didn't like what I was hearing when I got to Dallas. So we did 2 weeks in Memphis, and then we came home for a couple of weeks and worked on it. And then we went for like 3 weeks in Dallas at Dallas Sound Lab. Mm-hmm. And we got to Dallas Sound Lab, and I basically asked to engineer because I had a vision of what I thought it should sound like, and I was enough of an engineer to be able to achieve that vision. And they said, sure. And so I spent those 3 weeks engineering. Otherwise, I would have been pretty much just sitting there programming an occasional drum machine. And so I ended up engineering almost all the guitars and vocals and some of my keyboards.
And that was the first album that Jimmie sang on, right?
Yeah.
He had never sang before.
No, and he was a little concerned about that.
Yeah.
He was shy about it.
Yeah.
Took him a minute. But the songs were so cool.
Now you can't shut him up.
Yeah, I know. I know. That's great, though. It was a great moment for him in his life, to make that transition. And the trust between them was so palpable, and it was so cool to be working with the two of them and hearing them tell stories about their family and growing up and, all of this. And Stevie was always respectful and deferential to his big brother, even though he was Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was by far the more famous of the two of them, but was always a family guy with Jimmie.
Yeah. So being from Texas, of course, when they announced they were going to, that's what everyone had wanted for years. Being fans of the Thunderbirds, being fans of Stevie Ray Vaughan, everyone wanted them to do this album together. Nile had experience with Stevie from the Let's Dance, from the Bowie album. Mm-hmm. Did you have any experience with them before? And did you know at the time, nobody knew what was going to happen after that album was finished, but did you know you were making something that special? Yeah, well, that special, I don't know, but I knew that it was special. Yeah. Because it was the two of them, because people had wanted that, because of who they were and their reputation, because of my personal feeling for them, having met them. And like one of the first nights me and Jimmie went out for dinner, and he wasn't a clean and sober guy at the time, and neither was I. So we had a few drinks, and I had this giant pile of crawfish, and then we talked like all night. We all became very familial very quickly. Yeah. And it became a lot of fun being around those sessions and watching things develop, watching lyrics getting written, watching them cut basics. Were you familiar with them before that album? Like familiar with their work?
I was more familiar with Stevie's work than Jimmie's work, but I knew a little bit of Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
I had seen Stevie play and was a giant fan, was a fan, so I couldn't wait to hear what that was going to be, and it was not disappointing. What came out, it was awesome. I still just I love those songs, and I love the memories. The people who came through, Rockin' Sydney is the one who said, "Roll and I'll feel something." Except he didn't say it where you hear it, but he said it. In Memphis, we met a guy named Booker Lowry, who was a classic old blues pianist with no pinky on his left hand, and it was all you know, that kind of thing. And he came in and tried and took a shot at one of the songs. It was just all fun. It was culturally fascinating to me because none of this was about where I was from. And it was, you know, and I wasn't that familiar with Texas coming in. I got a really good lesson in Texas from the Vaughan brothers. Yeah. Like the big Tex appeared, you know, at one point, what does he say? Draw. You know, like they're telling stories about Big Tex at the State Fair and stuff.
Have you ever seen Big Tex?
I've never seen I've seen pictures of Big Tex now.
You know, he burned down a few years ago.
He did.
He caught fire and he burned down, and then they rebuilt him, and now it's not the original Big Tex anymore.
I see.
So, but well, man, that's really cool. Like I said, I being a fan and being a kid, and you know, at the time, you know, we didn't know about addiction or any of that. You know, to hear Stevie tell his story, coming in to do In Step completely sober, and he's more scared playing sober than he ever been, and that's, you know, that album is amazing. And then, you know, the Vaughan Brothers album. Like I said, I walked in, that was the first thing I saw on your wall. You know? Well,
I have some other stuff that isn't on the walls too. I have like a sort of a little shrine because with his guitar pick in it and all that. Because he was feeling wonderful and talking about feeling wonderful. And plus Honey and I were supposed to go meet him and his girlfriend, have dinner in September. We had a date planned. We had plans, social plans. Yeah. I mean, you know, we were getting along real well. And I saw him play during that summer with Double Trouble, and they were just phenomenal. And, you know, he had really, because he did the sober thing in 86, I think, or 87, maybe 80s in there. So by the time we got to 1990, he was very comfortable in his own skin like that. That nervousness had passed. Yeah. And he was just confident and comfortable and very happy about being clear-headed and very proud of his participation in, you know, AA and stuff like that. And he was committed. He was really committed. Jimmie hadn't yet. Jimmie, I think, has done subsequently. Yeah. But so, you know, the more is the pity. I mean, not that we need more pity, but that Stevie passed at such a time where his life was just coming into focus, and he wanted. Here's an interesting scoop. Stevie Ray Vaughan wanted me to teach him music theory, and I had real trepidation about doing that, and I told him so. Because I don't want to become the guy who made you start thinking about it. Because listen to what you're doing now. Right. Like, what if I teach you all of this and then the fire goes out? Like, I don't want that. I was really worried about it. I think ultimately he would have ended up absorbing it. Because like I said, people would hear Nile and I talk and they'd become interested in how we could talk about those things articulately. You know, about chord structures and why certain things might work and what you call that chord in this particular spot in the song as it's functioning here, as opposed to where you might call it if it was doing something else somewhere else. And now
I've heard him talking catering, and I just go blank.
Yeah. He's really knowledgeable there.
Being a keyboard player and a great keyboard player. How easy is it to approach an artist and when you're not getting what they want and saying, hey, can I take a stab at it? And how receptive are artists when you
Well, I consider it a ridiculously ballsy move for me to approach the Vaughan
Yeah.
brothers about wanting to engineer it.
Well, not just them. Oh, like that, but like any artist. Like I'm sure you've had.
I don't know
before.
if I've ever done that
Oh.
since or before, but
Okay.
I really felt strongly that I hate to say it this way, but I could make a better record than that guy could, and I wanted to. I wanted the chance. You know,
Yeah.
you're not going to get that many chances to record these two guys, so
No.
make it count. You know.
Yeah, I mean,
So what was the rest of the question? No,
like, have you ever had to approach a band or an artist and say, like, you know, your guy's not cutting it. You know, can we bring someone in, or maybe me, or how do you approach that situation? Or have you ever had to do that?
I'm always pretty forthcoming with trying to help.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if I have a failing in the area that you're describing, it's that I'm trying too hard to help and the artist is feeling like, hey, wait a minute, I know how to do this already.
Yeah.
Like, so I have hit that wall with a couple of different people and apologized profusely when I realized that it wasn't being received in the manner, in the spirit in which it was being offered.
Yeah. Because ultimately what's being released is going to have your name attached to it some way. So that's not, I don't care.
I
mean, is that why you, like when you say you feel strongly, when you just want to help, and it might be taken differently because your name ultimately, even just as an engineer.
Well, sometimes you're invited in. For example, there was a day that Bowie was out singing. Here's a Bowie story. Mm-hmm. Bowie was out there singing, and I'm in the control room with the engineer, and Nile's not there at that particular moment. For whatever reason. I don't even remember why. And he asks me what I think of what he's just done. And I listen to it. And on the one hand, it's cool because it's him.
Yeah.
And this is the guy who trembles like a flower and the voice cracks and everybody loves it. You know, so where am I going to exactly fit my aesthetic into how do you evaluate David Bowie on a moment-to-moment basis? But I thought the safest thing to do as a producer is to say, I think that's pretty good, but I'd give it another shot. And he looked at me like, oh, really? And said, play it for me again. And he listened to it back, and he decided he liked it that way. Now, if my being bold enough to say that to David Bowie was the thing that made him get his dander up and decide that that was the one, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was just an odd moment because David and I got along great, and I spent a year sitting next to him, and I have gifts and pictures of my children with him and my son with him, and, you know, this was just a moment during a creative environments are vulnerable. People are inherently vulnerable when they're expressing themselves.
Yeah.
And I know all of that. And so I didn't take it real personally. I really hoped he didn't either, and he didn't, and we were all fine. I had a moment with Laban once where I may have suggested a harmony note, and he didn't like that I had done that. And okay, I apologize profusely. I'm so sorry I made you feel that way.
Yeah.
You know, I think if you don't take the chance, what am I putting at risk here, really? I mean, now I'm year 35 with Nile Rodgers, so obviously I wasn't putting that much at risk. I'm still here. But I think you have to, in a creative environment, be willing to take some risk without being in any way demeaning, disrespectful, not unsupportive. I don't want to be any of that.
Yeah.
But in the spirit of trying to help somebody, you offer something, and they may choose to refuse that thing that you've just offered. And I try to keep it in that context.
Yeah. I feel that as a tech sometimes working with John or anybody really.
Yeah.
If he's doing something, you hear something, you suggest it to him, and he's very receptive. You know,
John is.
But there's, other artists I've worked for going, hey, maybe this.
Simon is too, to be fair. I'm not trying to make Simon look bad because Simon had every right to feel the way he felt. And I have tremendous love and respect for the man. So this is not me casting any shade.
It didn't
on
sound
any
like
of
that.
these guys.
Yeah, no.
But I think in a creative environment, you owe it to everybody to give it your best. And if that involves telling them something that they turned to you and didn't like hearing, well, that might happen sometimes between any two people at dinner. It's just, and now this is a uniquely creative and vulnerable situation. And people sometimes take things differently than you meant them.
But I think ultimately, creatives or artists, they don't, when they're in that position, they don't want yes man around going, oh, that sounded great.
Until they do. But I mean, for the most part, they don't. And that's why, but that's why, John, that's why you feel like you should give your best to John.
Yeah.
Because that's what he's paying you to do.
Yeah.
And John deserves that. Now, he might not always like the message. As long as he doesn't confuse that with not liking the messenger, that's fine. And I think in both of the circumstances I just cited with those two famous singing guys, neither of them took it out of the messenger. I mean, neither of them, came away disliking me for it. I mean, I definitely take a very humble position with all of those guys. I don't presume to know better than they do anything about what they're doing.
You've just anyone who Googles your name, you've been an engineer, an artist. You've done it all, man. I've
been very, very lucky.
Yeah, a lot of it's luck, a lot of it's talent. A lot of it's you can be lucky until you're unlucky. If you didn't have the right attitude, you don't last long. I guess. But what's your thing? Do you like performing? Do you like being behind the board? Do you just like, what is your favorite of all of them? What do you prefer to be doing? Because I watch you on stage
I
every
prefer
night.
to be in exciting creative spaces. And it doesn't really, I mean, right now I love playing gigs. Playing gigs are it's what I've been doing since I was 15 years old for money, so it's like, it's just fun. And it's not scary to me. And I take it very seriously, the responsibility, and especially playing in Chic, because I think so highly of my bandmates and the level at which they present that I feel like I really do have to live up to what they're at.
Yeah.
I try to be humble about it, but what interests me the most is how to create a successful creative space. And whether that occurs in a recording studio or on a stage isn't that big. And whether I'm sitting in the keyboard player's chair, the engineer's chair, or the producer's chair, doesn't matter that much to me, aside from wanting to get paid for it. But I mean, creatively, it doesn't matter that much to me. It's being part of that social possibility of a successful creative space that interests me the most. And it's what I'm going to be talking about a lot on my forthcoming speaking tours that I'm going to do, because I've done a lot of mentoring and speaking at colleges and things like that. And I'm about to begin to formalize that into something where I'm going to go out and give master classes and seminars. And one of the things I'm going to focus on is the answer to this question I'm giving you, which is, what is a successful creative space, and how do you create and maintain that? And what stands in the way of that, and how do you avoid those things that stand in the way of that, and things of that nature. So it's not that specific to me, but if you're asking, I like playing keyboards. I like playing guitar. Right now, I'm completely infatuated with the Rolly Seaboard, which is, have you ever seen one? It's kind of like a memory foam keyboard. Here.
You know what? I have seen one. Nick had one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Feel it, though. Feel.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got all this expressive capabilities.
Yeah.
And your piano playing gets you some part of the way there, but not really that far. And I've been practicing this thing now for like 6 years. And I think I might be onto something. No,
and I only say that
get the hang of it.
I only say that Nick has one because I saw it in the Pressure Off video.
Oh yeah,
it's in the video.
Oh well, it does look cool.
Yeah,
I did shoot it for video too. We had during pandemic lockdown, we all had to do our own videos.
Okay,
and excuse me, even though I rarely play that on stage. Excuse me. I brought it out back on the porch and had my son James shoot my video. And I was, because it looks cool. And,
It does, yeah.
Underneath looking cool, it's incredibly difficult to play well because keyboard players, you don't have to play a piano in tune. A piano's in tune. No matter where you press that C, that middle C, it still plays middle C.
Yeah.
That's not the case on this thing. It's got, you go like this and the pitch varies. So you actually have to play it in tune. And I am just excited as hell about playing this thing. I'm excited as hell about my new guitar, my new D'Angelico guitar. I've been playing guitar since I was 9 years old. So, and I used to play brass instruments, and I was a brass minor in college. And playing on the Rolly reminds me more of being a brass player than being a keyboard player, because I can express melody in the way that I used to on the trombone on this keyboard.
Yeah.
So these are the things that interest, what interests me is the same things that quote unquote got me here, which is just getting interested in stuff, getting excited about it, and getting better at it.
Yeah.
And I know it all sounds very vague and probably isn't the answer you thought you were bargaining for.
No.
It's so I don't prefer playing live to the studio or playing in the studio or producing in the studio. I just like being in a cool creative space with other cool people who inspire me. And playing in Chic definitely checks all of those boxes.
Yeah. Well, I got most of my time spent with you is either watching you on stage or talking to you backstage.
Right.
But
catering.
To me, it's very refreshing to hear that you still get excited about new gear. You still get excited to learn it. You're not afraid to learn it. Because along the way, artists that have been in the business as long as you have, they tend to lose that excitement and they only see their instruments when they're on stage, and that's sad because it's what got them there that they've forgotten. And it's really refreshing to hear that you know.
But I'm doing all of it. I'm doing software work. Like I've been consulting with software companies for 30 years, beta testing and doing software development with them. And I still love doing that too. It's like, I don't know. I wake up every day wanting to be learning stuff. That's just how my mind works. I'm not like a real workaholic like Nile. Like Nile will, work 48 hours a day. Yeah. But I continue to be engaged in the feeling that got me here, which is wanting to learn to get better at stuff. Everything I've ever done, including engineering, running recording studios, and everything else, has been at the service of feeling like I'm a better musician at the end of it. And so learn to play that thing and getting my tone up to be able to play well on that D'Angelico and like playing the Steinway in my dining room that I've missed for 50 years and trying to get that Phantom across the room to work. This is all stuff that really just interests me. And I actually have the space in my life to be able to research, to run these things down.
Yeah.
Thank God for Nile Rodgers and my job with him. So I actually have the room in my life right now to do this.
You mentioned earlier you've been getting paid for music since you were 15. Did you ever think back then, this far ahead, and the artists you've got to work with, the legends you've got? You guys, Chic, are legendary. So when that phone call came that we started the conversation about in terms of how I met Nile in 1988, I was 30, 31 years old, and I was developing my life plan. I wasn't married yet. And it was starting to look like I was going to end up teaching this stuff for a living. And I was going to have to go back to school. So I was actually going back to grad school to get a master's degree so I could actually make some money teaching young people how to do this. Mm-hmm. I didn't really want to go to work for somebody else in their recording studio anymore. I kind of wanted to produce, develop my skills as a music producer as much as anything else, because I thought I had a pretty good vision of the big picture. Yeah. I had a completely different vision in mind. That's why when I said that phone call came, I saw the fork in the road that Yogi Berra talked about. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. I was either going to continue to pursue my master's degree teaching young people and getting a better job than the one I had at Five Towns College, or I was going to go to work for Nile Rodgers and go back to making records as a player and programmer, which
In other words, not as an engineer, not built like. I made a funny decision when I graduated college in 1978. I had been playing professionally for a bunch of years, and I made a decision that I wasn't just going to play music for anybody willing to pay me. That I wanted to keep music special in my life. And anything I was going to be able to do to support that idea, keeping music special, I didn't care if that was the moneymaker. I just wanted it to be cool and special where I was doing it, and I knew I could do other things to make money. And I did for many years. Other things, including I ended up running a studio. I ended up putting home theaters in rich people's houses at one point. I worked a lot of retail.
I think we've all done that.
The install?
Home theater install jobs. We've all done that at one point, right?
I guess. I it's all valuable to me. But I also, so I had one foot in professional audio, but I also had one foot in consumer audio and audio video, So I was well trained in all of that stuff. To me, it's the information gathering phase never left. Like I tell college students, you're in the information gathering phase right now. You're building your skill set. They say that, success is the meeting of preparation and opportunity. So you're doing all that preparation. You're gathering your skills. You're learning the things, finding what interests you. You should be doing that. So that when the opportunity comes, Kevin Jones calls on the phone and says he represents Nile Rodgers, you've got something to bring. And I did. I was lucky that I did, but I did. And it worked out. But it's not always going to be that way for people, but it worked out well for me.
Yeah. Are you and Nile still as tight as you've always been?
Personally, yeah, but I hardly see him. Because Russell Graham does the production work that I used to do next to him daily. And I'm totally fine with that. And I do everything I can to support them. And, just this morning, Russ and I were for the last 2-3 days, we've been listening to mixes of what we played last week and talking about it. I'm really grateful that Russ seeks my opinion about things. Mm-hmm. I certainly seek his opinion I think the world of Russ. Russ is like my little brother.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody.
He's a good dude.
He's great.
Wink, wink.
incredible talent, just and intellect on that man and heart in that man. But anyway, so I don't spend as much time with Nile as I once did. I once spent, 100 hours a week with him and our friends in Duran Duran for, 7 days straight. I don't do that work with Nile so much anymore. Now I started out with one job, and then by about 2000, I had like 5 people's jobs, and now I'm back to having sort of one person's job again, and I'm quite happy with that because,
right on.
I'm 66 years old. I don't feel like I have to prove everything every day, and I don't necessarily want to work 100-hour weeks for the rest of my life. So I don't mind any of this. Not only don't I mind it, I couldn't be more grateful. I think it's just wonderful what I get to do now.
It's a great attitude to have. Since you've dropped that name a couple of times, what was it like working with those guys?
Which guys?
Duran Duran.
It was great. Okay, so but there's
and I didn't mean dropping.
So the name. All right. So I'll.
All right.
Do they listen to this?
I don't think so.
Before I tell this story.
I don't think so.
Before I tell this story. So it comes to be 2002-ish, and Nile is talking about we're going to go and work with the original 5 members of Duran Duran on their comeback album. Holy shit. Really? Wow, let's go do that. So what I come to find out is they didn't want me to come. They were putting us in, beautiful suites on the Thames. I mean, we were staying in whatever that hotel is in. It's not Battersea. It's we were working in Battersea. It's theater, and we were staying at what at the time was either a Hilton or it was something that's just right there on the Thames next to the bridge. They didn't. What I later came to find out is they, and most notably Nick, my dear friend, who is now like my best friend in the band. Well, I don't know if I have a best. I love them all, but they had Mark Tinley, And they had been using Mark Tinley for years, and Mark Tinley's a genius.
Mhm.
And he and Nick have a great relationship. And they were like, no, we'll use our guy. And Nile was like, no, I want to bring my guy. Well, you don't need to bring your guy. We've got our guy. No, I really want my guy there. So he basically insisted that I should come there. And I hadn't really fully realized that at the time. So I arrive, and I'm in my suite having a curry with my dear friend Aunt Bowles, who lives in London and I hadn't seen and I was happy to see. And my phone rings, and the people downstairs say, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Taylor would like to see you up in his room. And now, first of all, I haven't met anybody except John. And I met John in 1988. 18, that's funny. In 1988, and it was very briefly, and I knew he would remember me, but I don't know which Mr. Taylor they're talking about, because there's 3 of them. So, cheeky as I am, because I'm literally eating dinner, I say to Aunt, come on, we're going upstairs. And I brought my friend up with me, which was sort of a symbolic way of showing that I'm not going to be intimidated easily. Yeah. And so I knock on the door, and John Taylor answers and invites me in. And I introduce him to my friend. And inside the room is Andy Taylor. So it's not one Mr. Taylor, it's 2 Mr. Taylors, both of whom play string instruments. And I sit down, and they basically... it's the most gentle inquisition you've ever had. But it was basically, what are you here for? What are you here to do? So that's when it became clear to me that the fight to get me there was more protracted and went deeper than I had realized up to that moment. And I told him, I'm here to do anything I can to help you guys make the best record possible. And whatever that means and whatever that takes. As far as I know, I'll be at the very least operating Pro Tools in the way that Nile knows that I can to facilitate his process. And I typically do the engineering, but if I'm not engineering, that's fine. And I'm happy to meet and work with Mark because I've heard so much great things about him. And, I basically explained to them that I'm here to make your lives better in any way that I can. And they seemed satisfied with that. And they didn't seem to mind too much that I had brought Aunt up with me. Yeah. And the next day we went into the studio to start working, and I met Mark. And I don't know if do you know Mark Tinley?
No, I don't.
Mark Tinley is what's known nowadays as an Aspie. He's got Asperger's autism. And he's a really unique, creative, smart, but communicationally weird dude. And I don't think he would mind my saying that at all. And I love him and I respect him. And we got along great. And we talked about where this project was, because what I hadn't realized was this project had been in process for a year at that point, or maybe most of a year. And they had recorded tracks in Capri at some point, and they had recorded tracks, and Mark had recorded all kinds of things for this, and that's why they thought Mark was going to continue to finish this record with them. And now it's all becoming much clearer. But Mark is not in any way, neither of us is either intimidated or resentful of the other's presence. We're getting along great, and I'm thrilled to have somebody else there working with us. It's like I don't feel threatened by any of this. I actually think at this point it's kind of funny that I'm having to justify my existence to these people. And we started working, and I engineered and ran Pro Tools, and Mark sat in the back of the room and did the programming job, and it went along great. It was really hard work. I brought certain skill sets to it that he didn't have, that he learned from and still appreciates. He taught me some things that I didn't know, but one of the funny things happened logistically was he had apparently been trying to convince them for some period of time that their Pro Tools rig was not up to snuff given the current demands of the job and what's available. And as one does when it's your own employee who's telling you this, you're sort of resisting because you're still getting results. I walked in, said the same thing, and they immediately laid out tens of thousands of pounds to upgrade the system. And Mark is sitting back there doing the British Aspie equivalent of, what am I, chopped liver? Yeah. Like which I just thought was hilarious because, I mean, I didn't mean to make anybody feel weird about it, but I basically explained to them why the system needs to be upgraded and to what level it needed to be upgraded, and they just accepted that from me. And it's not unique to me and him, and it's not unique to this situation, but I've seen plenty of guys who employ plenty of guys whose guy has been telling them something for a long time that they've been resistant. And then some stranger walks up and says, you know what you should do? And they go, boom, let's do it.
That sounds about right.
And that's exactly what happened with me and the gear and them. And I don't think any of them would remember this, but I thought it was hilarious at the time that they were just willing to buy. I mean, they needed it. I would never, ever ask somebody to buy shit they didn't need. But I used to sell stuff to people. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
I don't sell people things they don't need.
The story of you taking your friend Ed up to meet him would have only been better.
Ant Bowles. Anthony.
Anthony.
Ant in England.
Ant.
Yes.
Would have only been better as you guys took your curry with you.
Yeah. Show up at the door like this. Sorry, we were right in the middle of dinner. Would you like some?
Oh, that's great, man. That's really cool.
And we became really great friends over the course. What we did was we worked 3 2-week marathons where I literally worked 100-hour weeks. Because when you work with Duran Duran in a recording studio, you probably know this, there's always a line at the door. Whoever's not doing that thing with you right now, there's 4 more guys at the door waiting to do their thing.
Yeah.
Because it's it's very much of a democracy when they're working together and everybody gets to do their thing. It's not like one guy is sort of telling everybody what to do. So this keeps an engineer very busy. Yeah. And I spent
working to get that same answer from all 5.
No, I'm not even really doing that. I just want to make each one of them happy in the moment. Another interesting thing was that I played a bunch of keyboards, and that's all I'm going to say about that. At Nick's insistence.
Okay.
At Nick's insistence. And I kept saying, Nick, come on, you play this. He's like, Rich. So I played some keyboards, but I don't think anything I played actually ended up on the record, but there were some really wonderful moments where I'm at a keyboard and Nick and Mark are both hovering over turning knobs and making me sound like Nick Rhodes. And so I got to be Nick Rhodes. And that was like incredibly fun, from a sound standpoint. These are sounds that I don't typically get to use in my daily workflow. So that part of it was fun too.
Right on.
Getting to play some keyboards with them.
As 2 fellow guys who work in this industry, when people hear who I work for, they're like, oh my God. And I'm sure the same with you. You said earlier, like you had this friendship with Bowie, but who have you worked with that made you say, oh my God, like, well, I'm going to get to work with who?
Oh, so many of them.
Is there any one that stands out that?
There's a lot of them that stand out. The one that's coming to mind right now is Bob Dylan. We did a song with Bob Dylan in 1996 for the movie Feeling Minnesota, which is where he's from. And he wanted to do a cover of Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire. And I was the keyboard player on the session. I was not the engineer. And the rhythm track section at the time was the then Chic rhythm section, Nile Rodgers, Bernard Edwards, Omar Hakim, and me. And Bob was just endlessly fascinating. And I was thrilled to be there, hearing him and working with him and feeling his vibe and interacting with him. It was just very interesting. It was just really, if I had to pick one, but there's been so many, the 10 days I spent recording Diana Ross alone in a room didn't suck either. Like getting to meet and play with Elton John, who was my absolute hero as a kid. And I was like known in Bethpage as the kid who played all those Elton John songs. And now it's 2006. I'm at his house playing your song while he's singing it. Like this is some pinch me stuff. This is way beyond any kind of wildest dream anybody might ever have. Yeah. So there's been just countless moments with different people at different times. And some of them, most of them are really, really famous people, but it's not even so much that interests me. It's their creativity that interests me, that more than the fact that other people love them. Yeah. I've never been that guy, really.
I'm going to tell a Bob Dylan story real quick.
Go.
The look I just got.
Well, you got a Bob Dylan story?
I do. Not me personally, but there's this cat in San Francisco, and he knows all the Duran guys. He might know you guys, but he's a park ranger at Alcatraz.
Wow.
And so whenever we're there, he'll take us on the special tour. Not the tour that people pay for. But he was taking us on this tour one time, and he was taking me and some friends, and he was telling us all these stories about who filmed what videos and what movies were filmed there. And he said, MTV came here once, and they would do these concerts, and the Wallflowers were doing a concert. Mm-hmm. So Jacob showed up with his family to kind of walk the place early, and this park ranger was like, so how's Bob doing? And this and Bob and Jacob was answering his question. And one of his kids asked his wife, "Who's Bob?" And his wife said, "Your grandpa." I don't know why I love that story so much, but it's so good. Your grandpa.
Yeah. Who's Bob?
Who's Bob? Anyway, I'll probably edit that out.
No, I liked it. I loved it. That's funny.
Well, man, I do appreciate you having me up here. I appreciate your time. I know we could probably go on forever. You've done it all in this business. Richard, I love you, man. I love
you too,
whenever
buddy.
we tour together. I love giving you that fist bump on your way to the stage.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually have been sitting in your lair recently waiting to go on stage.
Yeah. I know Martin has taken my stool because he can't find yours and taking it up there to you.
Sorry about that.
But man, our podcast it's called Is Breakfast Included?
I love that.
If it was included, what would you have?
These days, it's all about the fiber. This is old guy talk. Pretty much, it's all about the fiber for me in the morning these days.
Okay.
I had some problems and restructured my whole sort of dietary life around my weakness in my digestive tract, and so I eat fiber for breakfast. I quite often. What did I have today? Today I had a salad and a tuna melt sandwich, fresh tuna salad I made over whole grain bread with some provolone.
I don't know. We've never had that one.
Quite often I have granola, fruit, berries, either yogurt or oatmeal with that, and maybe a side protein. So I'm just finishing off the Thanksgiving smoked ham because it's smoked. It lasts a long time.
Yeah.
So I put some smoked ham cubes in my salad today, but yesterday I was frying up slices. I like to cook.
All right.
I'm a real, I'm a kitchen guy. I like to be in the kitchen. I like cooking. I like being creative.
Cool.
I make soups. I'm in it. I've been cooking for myself since I was in college. So eventually you start to get the hang of it. Kind of like anything else.
Well, man, thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
It's my pleasure.
This was the first one we've done together, and it's a pleasure being here.
It's an honor to be on your podcast, and I love seeing you, bro, every time.
Likewise.
Right on, Richard Hilton. I told you at the beginning of this, he was pretty incredible, right? Yeah. Great guy, too. We had the pleasure of spending the afternoon with him, and it was a blast. All right, guys, I am done. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you next week.